Well, how often do we hear about local councils overstepping their responsibilities and power and dabbling in the issues of national affairs all the time? And the latest example of this comes from the notorious Central Coast Council in New South Wales, which had to be sacked for racking up a debt of $89 million. Well, there must be something in the water on the Central Coast, because the administrator has now come up with an appalling rule which effectively bans the flying of the Australian flag in the main part of town. Despite a long history in which the Chamber of Commerce installed numerous Aussie flags on buildings, on light poles, and paid for it, the council claims that this might offend some people. Offend some people? What, those that hate this country or hate its colonial history? Or have they received complaints? No word on that. They are kidding. The last time I looked, there was no crime against flying our flag, nor should there ever be. Joining me now is Matthew Wales, President of the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. Matt, thank you very much for your time. Where did this outrageous policy come from? And who's the one that's so repulsed about the flag? Is it someone in the deep, dark corridors of the Central Coast Council, or is it the new administrator?
Good evening, Chris. We don't actually know. We're still trying to get to the bottom of this and find out just who wrote this policy, which is going up to Council on Tuesday night. And the policy effectively prevents our Chamber of Commerce from flying the Australian flag banners on the light poles in the main street, West Street, in Yamina Beach. And I just think this is a deplorable situation. We've been negotiating, pretty hardly with Council over the last 2 or 3 years to try and get the right to install our flags again in the main street, just like we have in the past.
So did they say who could be offended now? Did they explain that to the Chamber of Commerce, or is this some kind of woke hunch they've got?
Well, no, they didn't. They just simply said it may offend some people in our community. And of course, they didn't actually spell out who they thought that might be. But I just might add that we have letters of support from a range of organisations on the peninsula for reinstalling the Australian flags in the main street, including our local state member, Liesl Tesh, including the Parliamentary Secretary of the Central Coast, Adam Crouch, and including the head of the the Aboriginal Land Council in Yamina. So there's broad support for this. And we just don't understand the council's adamant position on preventing this from happening, to the point now where they've prepared a report to go to council, which again, having read it, we're very disappointed with this report. And they have continually blamed or used excuses for why this can't happen in the past, ranging from the cost of the flags, which we've agreed to pay, lack of manpower to put them up on the light poles. They said it might offend people. Recently, they came up with the excuse that it was contrary to the federal government protocols for flying the flag, which it isn't. It's actually strictly in accordance with the protocols. And then more recently, Chris, they've, in their report to the council meeting, they've said that Ausgrid do not support the flying of the national flag on their assets.
Ausgrid,
who own the poles, they own the infrastructure. Now,
but the flags might hurt the poles.
When I read that, I could not believe that that a company like Ausgrid, which is half owned by the taxpayers of New South Wales, could possibly take that position. I thought that was extraordinary. So I did a bit of digging and I went back to their own protocols for flying banners on their infrastructure. Mm-hmm. There is no mention at all of any rule that precludes Australian flag banners from being used on these poles.
They made that up.
So they just made it up. So I took the time out to contact Ausgrid, and they have very kindly provided me with a letter to the effect that they have no objection to the flag banners being flown.
And so, this has been a great tradition, hasn't it, Matthew, in terms of flying the flags on Australia Day, for instance, or the time leading up to Australia Day? It's been a regular thing in that part of the world for a long time.
It has. We flew our Australian flag banners for many years. The community loves seeing them up on Australia Day, and we've been trying desperately over the last 2 or 3 years to do exactly the same. And the feedback I'm getting from our business community and from local ratepayers and residents is that they're furious. They can't believe that this decision is being made by a council, and this, mind you, this is an unelected council. This is a council under administration to prevent the community from having their flag bangers, their Australian flag bangers, flowing again on Australia Day. Absolutely outrageous.
And for those from other parts of Australia, for those who may not have been to the Central Coast, places like Gosford and Umina are archetypically Australian settings, aren't they?
They are. We're very, very proud of our community, and we're very proud of our country and our Australian flag. This is something that we wanted to do because it had broad community support, and we're very disappointed. The Central Coast Council has made absolutely no attempt to sit down with us and come up with a solution to this problem. And the solution is quite simple. As long as the Australian flag banners comply with the federal government protocols, why shouldn't they be flown on the light poles?
Can you get this reversed?
We hope so. I will be speaking to the council meeting on Tuesday night in the hope that the administrator will see common sense. I'm very disappointed in this report. I think it is terribly misleading. I think the comments relating to Ausgrid are simply wrong. And I would hope that the administrator might actually seek to defer this report just to check on the facts, because as it currently stands, I think the report is very misleading. That's not acceptable to the community. If you actually have an excuse why you don't want to fly the Australian flag, then tell us. Yeah. But don't use Ausgrid as an excuse why you shouldn't be doing it.
This is nothing more than a woke hunch from the administrator, I feel. Matthew Wales, thank you very much for your time this evening from the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. What an outrage in such an archetypically Australian setting, beach setting of the Central Coast.